She screamed, "Go back to Africa," at him in the middle of the store. When he opened his mouth to respond, the filming crowd froze at his unexpected words. Marcus Johnson checked his watch as he pushed through the rotating doors of Riverside Department Store. 2:15 p.m. He had exactly 4 to 5 minutes before his next class. The cool air conditioning hit his face as he adjusted the straps of his backpack, heavy with medical textbooks. "Just grab the supplies and get out," he muttered to himself, pulling a crumpled shopping list from his green hoodie pocket. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as he navigated past the cosmetics section, his sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. The store wasn't particularly busy for a Thursday afternoon. A few elderly shoppers browsed the aisles, their shopping carts moving at a leisurely pace. At the front registers, 2 cashiers chatted quietly while folding T-shirts. Marcus glanced at his list again: notebooks, highlighters, and a new USB drive for his upcoming presentation. He headed toward the office supplies section, mentally rehearsing his speech for tomorrow's class. The impact of socioeconomic factors on healthcare accessibility. The words ran through his head as he turned down aisle 7. That's when he first noticed her. The older woman stood at the end of the aisle, her gray hair styled in a neat bob, wearing a white cardigan with small flower details. She was organizing items in her cart, but Marcus caught her quick, sharp glance in his direction. He'd seen that look before, the way her eyes narrowed, how her hands instinctively clutched her purse closer. Marcus kept walking, pretending not to notice. He'd learned that skill early, how to act like you didn't see people watching you, following you, judging you. His father had taught him that lesson when he was 12. "Keep your head high, son. Their problem isn't your problem." He reached for a pack of highlighters, and the woman, he'd later learn her name was Eleanor, cleared her throat loudly. "These young people nowadays," she said to no one in particular, her voice carrying down the aisle. "You never know what they might be up to." Marcus grabbed 2 packs of highlighters, adding them to his basket. His phone buzzed, a text from his study group partner about tomorrow's presentation. "Did you see him come in?" Eleanor's voice again, louder this time, speaking to another shopper who had just turned into the aisle. "We should tell security to keep an eye out." The other shopper, a middle-aged man in a business suit, looked uncomfortable and quickly walked away. Marcus moved to the notebook section, his heart beating a little faster despite himself. He'd planned to buy 5 notebooks, 1 for each of his current courses. As he reached for them, he could hear Eleanor's shopping cart wheels squeaking as she followed him, maintaining what she probably thought was a discreet distance. His mind flashed back to that morning, standing in front of his bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie for the practice presentation. "You've got this," he told his reflection. "Top of your class, Marcus. Don't let anyone tell you different." Now, under the harsh store lighting, those confident words felt distant. "Excuse me." A young employee approached him, her name tag reading Sarah. "Can I help you find anything?" Before Marcus could respond, Eleanor's voice cut through the air. "Yes, you can help by keeping an eye on." "I'm good, thanks," Marcus interrupted, forcing a smile. "Just getting some supplies for medical school." Sarah nodded, glancing between him and Eleanor with understanding in her eyes. "Let me know if you need anything." Marcus continued shopping, moving to the electronics section for the USB drive. His hands were steady as he picked up the small package, but he could feel sweat forming on his forehead. Eleanor's presence remained constant, her cart always 1 aisle over, her comments growing progressively louder. "In my day," she announced to a group of teenage girls who were shopping for phone cases, "people knew their place. Now they just walk around like they own everything." The girls looked at her, then at Marcus, their phones already half raised as if sensing something was about to happen. Marcus checked his watch again. 2:30 p.m. 15 minutes gone, and he still needed to check out and catch the bus. He turned toward the checkout lanes, his basket full of supplies. That's when it happened. Eleanor suddenly pushed her cart directly into his path, the metal frame hitting his hip. "Oh," she exclaimed, her voice dripping with fake concern. "I didn't see you there, though I've been seeing you everywhere in the store, haven't I?" Marcus took a deep breath, his father's words echoing in his mind. "Sometimes the hardest thing is staying calm when everything in you wants to react." "No problem," he said quietly, stepping back to give her space. But Eleanor didn't move her cart. "You've been following me," she accused, her voice rising. "I've seen you, circling around, watching my shopping cart." Other customers stopped what they were doing, turning to watch the scene unfold. Marcus could see phones being pulled out, cameras pointing in his direction. His pulse quickened, but his voice remained steady. "I'm just trying to buy my school supplies." "School supplies?" Eleanor laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the now quiet store. "Is that what you're calling it?" A small crowd began to form at the ends of the aisle. Marcus could see Sarah, the employee, talking urgently into her radio, presumably calling for security. His phone buzzed again in his pocket, probably another text about tomorrow's presentation, a presentation that suddenly seemed very far away. Eleanor's cart remained firmly planted in front of him, a barrier between him and the checkout lanes. She stood there, her finger now pointing directly at his chest, her face contorted with an anger that seemed to have been waiting for this moment, this target. Through the growing tension, Marcus could hear whispers from the gathering crowd, could feel the weight of their stares. Some looked concerned, others curious. A few were already recording with their phones. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and somewhere in the distance, a child started crying. Eleanor's voice cut through it all, building to what felt like an inevitable crescendo. Her hands gripped her cart tighter, her knuckles turning white against the metal bar. The security guard was visible now, moving slowly through the crowd, but he wouldn't make it in time to prevent what was coming. Marcus stood there, his basket of school supplies suddenly heavy in his hands, watching as Eleanor drew herself up to her full height. This was the moment, the calm before the storm, the intake of breath before the plunge. Marcus had been here before, in different stores, different situations, but always the same moment. He knew what was coming, could feel it in the air like static before a storm. Eleanor opened her mouth, and the ordinary afternoon at Riverside Department Store was about to become anything but ordinary. "I saw you following me," Eleanor spat out, her voice echoing through the store's now silent aisles. "You people think you can just go wherever you want these days." Marcus felt his shoulders tense but kept his voice level. "I haven't been following you. I'm just trying to buy my supplies." "Don't you me," Eleanor shot back, her cart still blocking his path. "I know exactly what you're doing. I wasn't born yesterday." The crowd around them had grown larger. Marcus could hear the soft beeps of phone cameras recording, the hushed whispers of onlookers. A teenager in a red hoodie nudged his friend, whispering, "This is going viral for sure." The security guard finally reached them, a middle-aged man with graying temples named Rodriguez, according to his badge. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, looking between Marcus and Eleanor. "Yes, there is." Eleanor turned to the guard. "This young man has been following me around the store. I don't feel safe." Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, his father's words from last Sunday dinner floating through his mind. They'd been discussing a similar incident at a gas station. "Son," his father had said, hands wrapped around a coffee mug, "these moments will come. They'll keep coming. But remember, your reaction is your power." Opening his eyes, Marcus addressed the security guard. "Sir, I'm a medical student at Riverside University. I came in to buy supplies for my presentation tomorrow." He held up his basket as evidence. "I haven't been following anyone." Rodriguez nodded slowly, clearly assessing the situation. But before he could respond, Eleanor cut in again. "Medical student?" She laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Is that what you're calling it now? I suppose next you'll tell me you're a brain surgeon." Rodriguez started, but Eleanor was on a roll now. "I've been shopping at this store for 30 years, she declared, her voice getting louder. 30 years. And now I can't even buy my groceries without feeling threatened." Marcus felt his phone buzz again in his pocket. Probably his study group wondering where he was. The presentation tomorrow seemed like it was in another universe now. "Look," he said calmly, "I don't want any trouble. I'll just go to another checkout lane." "Oh, you'd like that, wouldn't you?" Eleanor moved her cart to block his new path. "Just walk away after making me feel unsafe in my own neighborhood store." A woman in the crowd called out, "Leave him alone. He's done nothing wrong. Stay out of this." Eleanor snapped back. "You don't know what it's like, having to watch your back every time you go shopping." Marcus almost laughed at the irony of her statement. How many times had his mother taught him to keep his hands visible in stores? To keep receipts for everything he bought? To never wear his hood up while shopping? The memory of his mother's worried face flashed through his mind. Just yesterday, She'd been helping him iron his shirt for tomorrow's presentation. "You've worked so hard, Marcus," she'd said, smoothing out the collar. "Don't let anything stop you now." Rodriguez stepped between them. If you feel unsafe, I can escort you to another part of the store." "Escort me?" Eleanor's voice rose even higher. "I'm not the one who should be escorted. When did this country get so backward?" More phones came out. Marcus could see at least a dozen people recording now. An older man in a business suit shook his head and muttered, "This is ridiculous." Sarah, the employee from earlier, had returned with what appeared to be a manager, a tall woman in a navy blazer with a name tag reading Patricia. "Mrs. Wilkinson." Patricia addressed Eleanor, apparently recognizing her. "What seems to be the problem?" "The problem?" Eleanor gestured wildly at Marcus. "The problem is right here, standing in front of me, pretending to be a medical student of all things." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. The basket of supplies suddenly felt like it weighed 100 pounds. "I have ID," he said quietly, reaching for his backpack. "Don't you dare reach for anything," Eleanor shrieked, backing up her cart so quickly she nearly hit another customer. Patricia held up her hands. "Mrs. Wilkinson, please lower your voice. You're disturbing other customers." "I'm disturbing them." Eleanor's face had turned red. "What about him? Walking around, pretending he belongs here." The crowd's murmurs grew louder. Marcus could hear snippets of conversations. "Can't believe this is happening in 2024. Someone should do something. Poor guy just trying to buy supplies." A young girl, no more than 7 or 8, tugged on her mother's sleeve and asked loudly, "Mommy, why is that lady being mean?" The question hung in the air, its innocent clarity cutting through the tension. Marcus thought about his younger sister, how she'd asked similar questions when they were kids. How do you explain hate to a child? "Mrs. Wilkinson," Patricia tried again. "If you have a complaint, we can discuss it in my office." "Complaint? Oh, I'll file a complaint, all right." Eleanor's voice had taken on a shrill edge. "About how this store lets just anyone walk in now." Marcus checked his watch. 2:40 p.m. His class started at 3 p.m. Under normal circumstances, he'd still have time to make it. But this situation was spiraling. "Sir," Rodriguez addressed Marcus, "would you like to check out at another register?" Before Marcus could respond, Eleanor moved her cart again, blocking the entire aisle. "He's not going anywhere until security checks his bag." The crowd reacted immediately. "Are you kidding me? This is straight-up racism. Someone call corporate." Marcus felt sweat running down his back under his hoodie. The fluorescent lights seemed brighter somehow, harsher. The air conditioning that had felt so good when he walked in now sent a chill down his spine. His phone buzzed again. A quick glance showed messages from his study group. "Where are you? Practice starts in 15. Everything okay?" Nothing was okay. Standing there in aisle 7 of Riverside Department Store, surrounded by notebooks and office supplies, Marcus felt the weight of every similar moment he'd ever experienced pressing down on him. Every suspicious glance, every followed step, every clutched purse. Eleanor was still talking, her words becoming more heated, more pointed. The security guard looked increasingly uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Patricia, the manager, was speaking into her radio, probably calling for backup. And then Eleanor said it. The words that would make this ordinary Thursday afternoon anything but ordinary. The words that would soon be played and replayed on social media, that would spark discussions and debates, that would make Marcus Johnson's name known for reasons he never wanted. She drew herself up, pointed her finger directly at his face, and opened her mouth to deliver the sentence that would change everything. "You don't belong here." Eleanor's voice cracked through the air like a whip. "Go back to your country. Go back to Africa." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. The store went completely silent. Even the usual background music seemed to stop. Phones stayed raised, recording every second. But their owners stood frozen, waiting for his response. Marcus's grip tightened on his shopping basket. His knuckles turned white against the plastic handle. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a high-pitched whine that seemed to drill into his skull. "I said," Eleanor repeated, louder now, emboldened by the silence. "Go back to Africa. We don't want your kind here." Security guard Rodriguez stepped forward. "That's enough. No." Eleanor cut him off. "Somebody needs to say it. These people come here, pretending to be students, doctors. I am a student, Marcus said quietly, his voice steady despite the trembling in his hands. Liar. Eleanor's face contorted with rage. You're nothing but a thug in a hoodie. I've seen your type before. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment. In the darkness behind his eyelids, he saw his father's face from 12 years ago, after an incident at the local swimming pool. They'd sat in their car, Marcus crying in the passenger seat, his wet swimming trunks soaking the upholstery. Son, his father had said, there will be people who hate you without knowing you. That's their burden to carry, not yours. Opening his eyes, Marcus looked directly at Eleanor. The crowd had grown larger. He could see Sarah, the young employee, with tears in her eyes. Patricia, the manager, was on her phone, presumably calling the police. A group of teenagers had their phones out, live-streaming the whole thing. My kind? Marcus repeated, his voice carrying clearly through the silent store. His heart pounded against his ribs, but his words came out calm and measured. What kind would that be? Eleanor faltered for a second, caught off guard by his composure. You know exactly what I mean. People like you who think they can just. People like me, Marcus interrupted, still keeping his voice level. Medical students? People who wake up at 5 a.m. to study? People who work part-time to pay for their education? A murmur ran through the crowd. Someone whispered, Get here, bro. Don't you try to fool me. Eleanor's finger jabbed the air between them. I know what you really are. Coming into our stores, making decent people feel unsafe. Decent people. Marcus felt something shift inside him. Not anger, but a profound sadness mixed with determination. Decent people don't follow strangers around stores. Decent people don't make assumptions based on skin color. Decent people don't tell others to go back to places they've never been. The teenager in the red hoodie whispered to his friend, This is better than Netflix, bro. Eleanor's face flushed darker. How dare you lecture me? I was born here. This is my country. It's my country too, Marcus said softly. I was born right here in Riverside. Third-generation American. My grandfather served in Vietnam. My father teaches high school mathematics. And yes, I'm a medical student. He reached slowly into his back pocket, causing Eleanor to flinch dramatically. But all he pulled out was his student ID, holding it up for everyone to see. Marcus Johnson, Riverside University School of Medicine, class of 2025. Currently ranked third in my class. His voice grew stronger. But you didn't bother to ask any of that, did you? You just saw my skin color and made up your own story. The crowd had grown completely still. Even Eleanor seemed momentarily speechless. In the distance, Marcus could hear police sirens approaching. I don't. Eleanor started, then stopped. Her cat, which had been her weapon and shield throughout the confrontation, suddenly seemed to be the only thing keeping her upright. Marcus thought about his mother again, about all the times she'd told him to be careful, to keep his head down, to avoid confrontation. But he also remembered what she'd said just last week, after he'd aced his latest exam. Baby, you've got a voice. Use it for good. You know what the saddest part is? Marcus continued, his words cutting through the tension. While you've been following me around, making assumptions about who I am and what I'm doing here, I've been thinking about my presentation tomorrow. A presentation about healthcare disparities in underserved communities. About how prejudice and preconceptions can literally kill people. He paused, letting the words sink in. The sirens were getting closer. The very things you're showing right now, the bias, the unfounded fear, the hatred, these are the berries that keep people from getting the care they need. And instead of studying for that presentation, I'm standing here, defending my right to buy school supplies. A slow clap started somewhere in the crowd. Eleanor's hands had begun to shake, her righteous anger crumbling in the face of his dignity. I don't. She tried again, her voice smaller now. You can't possibly be a medical student. Marcus finished for her. Why not? Because of how I look? Because I'm wearing a hoodie? Because my skin is black? The police officers had arrived, pushing through the crowd. Two of them, a male and female officer, assessed the situation quickly. What's going on here? The female officer asked. Before anyone could answer, Marcus spoke up one last time, his voice carrying to every corner of the suddenly cramped aisle. What's going on, he said, still maintaining his composure, is that I came to buy school supplies and ended up getting a perfect example of why my research matters. Why the work I'm doing matters. Why the prejudices we carry can hurt not just individuals, but entire communities. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment, the dozens of phones still recording, the tears in some spectators' eyes, the look of shame now creeping across Eleanor's face. The male officer started to speak, but Marcus held up his hand, surprising himself with his own authority. He had one more thing to say, one final response to Eleanor's hateful words. He straightened his shoulders, looked Eleanor directly in the eyes, and prepared to deliver the words that would soon be shared across social media, quoted in news articles, and remembered by everyone who witnessed this moment in a department store on an ordinary Thursday afternoon. You want me to go back to Africa? Marcus's voice carried through the silent store, calm and clear as still water. I've never been there, but I'll tell you where I am going. I'm going to graduate next year, top of my class. I'm going to become a doctor, and maybe someday, I'll be the one treating you in the emergency room. And you know what? I'll treat you with the same respect and care I'd give any other patient, regardless of how they treated me in a department store. Eleanor's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The police officers exchanged glances, clearly realizing this was more than a simple disturbance call. Because that's what my parents taught me, Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger. That's what my education taught me. That's what being an American taught me. We're all human beings, deserving of basic respect and dignity. A woman in the crowd wiped tears from her eyes. The teenager in the red hoodie whispered, "Damn, that's deep." "I don't need to go back anywhere," Marcus said, still maintaining eye contact with Eleanor. "I'm exactly where I belong, in my community, pursuing my education, shopping at my local store. And your discomfort with that? That's not my problem to solve." Patricia, the store manager, stepped forward. "Mrs. Wilkinson, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises." But I've been shopping here for 30 years. Eleanor's voice had lost its earlier venom, replaced by something closer to panic. "And today will be your last day," Patricia replied firmly. "We have a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination." The female police officer touched Eleanor's arm gently. "Let's step outside and talk about this." "Wait," Eleanor said, her voice suddenly small. "I didn't mean. I was just worried about." "About what?" Marcus asked quietly. "What exactly about me made you worried? My textbooks? My school supplies? Or just the color of my skin?" The crowd had grown even larger. Employees from other departments had gathered at the ends of the aisles. The store's regular background music seemed jarringly inappropriate, some cheerful pop song about summer love playing while this scene unfolded. Marcus's phone buzzed again. 2:50 p.m. His presentation group would have to start without him. "I'm sorry," Eleanor whispered, but Marcus shook his head. "I don't need your apology," he said. "What I need is for you, and people like you, to understand something. Every time you follow someone around a store, every time you make assumptions based on appearance, every time you tell someone they don't belong, you're not just being cruel. You're showing your own limitations, your own fears, your own prejudices." The male police officer cleared his throat. "Son, would you like to press charges?" Marcus looked at Eleanor, really looked at her. She seemed smaller now, her earlier bravado gone. Her shopping cart, still full of groceries, stood between them like a barrier. "No," he said finally. "I don't want to press charges. What I want is to buy my school supplies, go to class, and continue working toward my goals. Because despite what some people might think, that's exactly what I'm supposed to be doing." A slow murmur of approval spread through the crowd. Someone near the back called out, "You're gonna be a great doctor, man." Eleanor's hands trembled as she gripped her cart. I should go." "Yes," Patricia agreed. "You should. And please don't return to this store." As the police officers began escorting Eleanor toward the exit, Marcus turned to Patricia. "I still need to pay for these supplies." Patricia shook her head. "They're on the house. It's the least we can do after—" "No," Marcus interrupted firmly. "I'll pay for them. I'm not looking for handouts or special treatment. Just equal treatment." The crowd started to disperse, but phones were still out, still recording. Marcus could already imagine the video spreading across social media, becoming another viral moment in America's ongoing conversation about race and prejudice. Sarah, the young employee who had first offered to help him, approached with tears in her eyes. "That was amazing. The way you handled that. Just did what my parents taught me, Marcus replied, managing a small smile. Stay calm, stay dignified, speak your truth. He walked to the checkout counter, aware of the eyes still following him, but these looks were different now. Admiring, respectful. The cashier, a young man with a name tag reading David, rang up his supplies with shaking hands. Man, I've never seen anything like that, David said as he bagged the items. You were like a human being standing up for himself. Marcus suggested quietly. Yeah, David nodded. Exactly like that. As Marcus paid for his supplies, he could hear snippets of conversations around him. Did you get it all on video? This is going viral for sure. That's what real class looks like. Future doctor right there. His phone buzzed one more time. A text from his father. Where are you? Your study group called worried. Marcus took a deep breath, picked up his bags, and headed toward the exit. The automatic doors slid open, and the late afternoon sun hit his face. In the parking lot, he could see Eleanor being talked to by the police officers, her head bowed. He pulled out his phone to call his father, knowing he'd have to explain why he missed the practice session. As he dialed, a young black boy, maybe 10 or 11, approached him with his mother. Are you really going to be a doctor? The boy asked, eyes wide with admiration. Marcus looked at the boy, seeing a reflection of his younger self. Yes, I am. And you can be whatever you want to be too. Don't let anyone tell you different. The boy's mother squeezed her son's shoulder, giving Marcus a look of profound gratitude. As they walked away, Marcus finally connected with his father's number. Dad, he said when his father answered, you're not going to believe what just happened at the store. He started walking toward the bus stop, his bag of supplies in one hand, phone in the other. Behind him, the automatic doors kept opening and closing, customers coming and going, life moving forward. But something had changed in that store today, not just for Marcus, but for everyone who witnessed it. His father's voice came through the phone, concerned. Son, are you okay? Marcus looked back at the store one last time, then smiled. Yeah, Dad, I'm more than okay. I think I just gave the most important presentation of my life, just not the one I was planning on. Marcus barely made it 3 steps from the store's entrance when his phone started buzzing continuously. Messages poured in from his study group, classmates, and friends who had already received clips of the incident. Marcus, is this you? Holy shit. This video is everywhere. You're trending on Twitter, bro. He stopped at the bus stop bench and sat down, his shopping bag rustling against his leg. The afternoon sun beat down on his face as he scrolled through the messages. A notification popped up. His sister had already shared the video to her Instagram story. Need a ride? Marcus looked up to see David, the cashier who had rung up his supplies. He stood there in his blue store vest, car keys dangling from his hand. My shift just ended, David said. Least I can do after, you know. Marcus checked the time again, 3:10 p.m. He'd already missed the start of class. Yeah, actually, that would help a lot. As they walked to David's car, more store employees emerged from the building, many filming on their phones as Eleanor was escorted to her vehicle by the police officers. I've worked here 3 years, David said, unlocking his Honda Civic. Never seen anything like that. The way you handled it. Marcus slid into the passenger seat, his shopping bag between his feet. Just did what I had to do. They pulled out of the parking lot just as a local news van turned in. David whistled. Man, this is going to be big. I just hope it doesn't affect my studies, Marcus said, watching the news van disappear in the side mirror. I got finals coming up. His phone rang. Dr. Matthews, his advisor at the medical school. Marcus took a deep breath before answering. Hello, Dr. Matthews. Marcus, his advisor's voice came through clear and firm. I've just received quite an interesting video from several students. Are you all right? Yes, sir. I'm on my way to campus now. I missed the practice presentation. But forget the practice presentation, Dr. Matthews interrupted. What you did in that store, that was the kind of composure we look for in medical professionals. The kind of dignity under pressure that makes a great doctor. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Thank you, sir. Take the rest of the day off. Process what happened. We'll reschedule your presentation for Monday. As Marcus ended the call, David turned onto University Avenue. So you're really ranked 3rd in your class? Yeah, Marcus nodded. Working on making it to 1st. They drove in silence for a few blocks before David spoke again. My little brother, he wants to be a doctor too. But sometimes he feels like, like it's not possible. Marcus finished. Like there are too many obstacles. Yeah, David parked in front of the medical school building. After what I saw today, I'm gonna tell him it's possible. Hard, but possible. Marcus gathered his supplies and opened the car door. Tell him it's more than possible. Tell him it's necessary. Inside the medical school building, heads turned as Marcus walked through the lobby. Students whispered and pointed at their phones, then at him. He kept walking, head high, straight to the elevator. The doors were about to close when a hand stopped them. Dr. Sarah Chen, his biochemistry professor, stepped in. Marcus, she said, pressing the button for the 4th floor. I saw the video. He shifted his weight, uncertain what to say. Dr. Chen was known for her strict professionalism. Your response about potentially treating her in the ER someday. She continued, that showed exactly the kind of ethical thinking we try to instill in our students. You made us proud today. The elevator doors opened, and they stepped out into the hallway. More students were gathered there, many already watching the viral video on their phones. The whispers followed him down the corridor. His study group was still in their assigned room. They all looked up as he entered, their faces a mix of concern and admiration. Bro, James, his lab partner, stood up. That was something else. Lisa, another group member, was already pulling up the video on her laptop. It's got over 50,000 views already. People are calling you the calm doctor. Marcus set his new supplies on the table. I don't need a nickname. I just need to study. Study. James laughed. After what just happened? Especially after what just happened, Marcus said firmly. That woman thought I didn't belong in medical school. The best response I can give is to excel here. He pulled out his new notebooks and started organizing them by subject. The familiar action helped ground him, even as his phone continued to buzz with notifications. A knock at the door made them all look up. Dean Richardson stood there, his usual stern expression softened with concern. Mr. Johnson, the dean said. Could I have a word? Marcus followed the dean to his office, aware of every eye in the hallway following him. Inside the office, Dean Richardson gestured for him to sit. I've received calls from 3 news stations already, the dean said, settling behind his desk. They want statements about one of our students showing exceptional grace under pressure. Marcus shifted in his chair. Sir, I didn't mean to bring attention to the school. Bring attention. Dean Richardson raised an eyebrow. Marcus, you demonstrated exactly what we strive to teach here: professionalism, composure, and human dignity. Your response to that situation was a credit to this institution. A notification popped up on the dean's computer. He glanced at it and chuckled. And apparently, you've just been invited to speak at next month's medical ethics conference. Marcus's phone buzzed again, his mother this time. He could imagine her worry, her pride, her fear all mixed together. Sir, Marcus said carefully, I appreciate the support, but I don't want this incident to define my time here. I want to be known for my work, my studies, my future contributions to medicine. Dean Richardson nodded slowly. That's exactly why you belong here, Marcus. Not despite what happened today, but because of how you handled it. When Marcus finally left the dean's office, the hallways had grown quieter. Most students had gone home for the day. He walked to his locker, planning to grab his biochemistry textbook before heading home. A piece of paper had been slipped through the locker vents. Marcus pulled it out, a drawing from one of the pediatric patients he worked with during his volunteer hours at the children's hospital. It showed a stick figure in a white coat with the words, "My hero doctor," written in crayon. His phone buzzed one more time. A text from his father. Proud of you, son. Dinner at home tonight. Your mother's making your favorite. Marcus closed his locker, the drawing carefully tucked into his notebook. As he walked toward the exit, he passed the giant window overlooking the hospital where he hoped to do his residency. The setting sun reflected off its windows, turning them to gold. A group of first-year students passed by, their whispers following him. That's him. The one from the video showed that racist lady what a real doctor looks like. Marcus pushed through the building's doors into the evening air. His phone showed 147 unread messages, 23 missed calls, and thousands of social media notifications. But none of that mattered as much as the weight of his new notebooks in his bag, tools for the journey ahead. Bought and paid for, exactly where they belonged. Eleanor sat in the back of the police car, not under arrest but waiting to give her statement. Through the window, she watched the growing media circus in the parking lot. 2 more news vans had arrived, reporters setting up their equipment under the store's giant logo. "Mrs. Wilkinson," Officer Martinez said, opening her notepad. "Please explain what happened from your perspective." Eleanor's hands shook as she clutched her purse. The righteous anger that had fueled her actions had evaporated, leaving behind a cold, hollow feeling in her stomach. "Hi," she started, then stopped. On a reporter's camera screen nearby, she could see herself playing on repeat, finger pointing, face contorted with rage, spewing words she now wished she could take back. "Take your time," Officer Martinez said, but her tone was cool, professional. In the store's entrance, Eleanor could see Patricia, the manager, giving a statement to another officer. Employees gathered around, many still holding their phones, probably sharing the video that would soon make Eleanor Wilkinson the internet's newest viral villain. "I was just shopping," Eleanor finally said, her voice small. "I've always shopped here." "And what made you confront Mr. Johnson?" The way Officer Martinez said his name, Mr. Johnson, made Eleanor flinch. Not that man, or the suspect, or any of the other labels Eleanor had assigned him in her mind. "Mr. Johnson. Medical student. Future doctor. I thought." She paused, the absurdity of her assumptions hitting her full force. "I thought he was following me." "Was he?" "No," Eleanor admitted, watching another news van pull into the parking lot. "He was just shopping for school supplies." Her phone started ringing, probably her daughter Sarah. By now, the video would have reached her too. What would she tell her grandchildren about why Grandma was trending on social media? Officer Martinez closed her notepad. "Mrs. Wilkinson, Mr. Johnson has decided not to press charges." Eleanor looked up sharply. "He's not?" "No," Martinez confirmed. "However, you are permanently banned from this store, and the manager may still pursue a civil action for disturbing the peace." Through the windshield, Eleanor watched as more people gathered outside the store. Many held phones up, probably hoping to catch a glimpse of either her or Marcus for their social media accounts. "I'd like to apologize to him," Eleanor said suddenly. Officer Martinez shook her head. "I don't think that's a good idea right now. The best thing you can do is leave quietly and reflect on your actions." A tap on the window made them both look up. Eleanor's daughter Sarah stood there, her face a mask of disappointment and concern. Officer Martinez opened the door. "Mom," Sarah said, her voice tight. "I came as soon as I saw the video." "What were you thinking?" Eleanor couldn't answer. The tears she'd been holding back finally spilled over. "Let's get you home," Sarah said, helping her mother out of the police car. "We need to talk about this." As they walked to Sarah's car, someone in the crowd recognized Eleanor. "Hey, that's her. That's the racist lady." Phones turned toward her. Eleanor ducked her head, letting her daughter guide her through the gauntlet of cameras and accusatory stares. "Mom," Sarah said as they reached her car, "Daniel saw the video at school. His friends are sharing it everywhere. He's asking why his grandmother would say such horrible things." Daniel, her 12-year-old grandson. Eleanor felt her knees go weak. Inside Sarah's car, the reality of what she'd done began to sink in fully. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing with notifications as the video spread further online. "The things you said, Mom," Sarah gripped the steering wheel tight. "That's not how we raised Daniel. That's not the example I want him to have." Eleanor stared out the window as they pulled away from the store. The news vans were setting up for their evening broadcasts. Tomorrow, her face would be on every local channel. "He was just buying school supplies," Eleanor whispered, more to herself than to Sarah. "He's going to be a doctor." "Yes, Mom." Sarah's voice was heavy with disappointment. Despite people making assumptions about him, he's going to be a doctor. And you turned a simple shopping trip into a traumatic experience for him. They drove in silence for a few blocks before Eleanor spoke again. "What do I do now?" "Now?" Sarah sighed. "Now you need to take a long, hard look at yourself, Mom. At your prejudices, your assumptions, your behavior. Because I can't have that around Daniel." Eleanor's phone buzzed again, a text from her bridge club canceling her membership. Another notification showed her church group's Facebook page filling with comments about the incident. "I need to make this right," Eleanor said. "You can't," Sarah replied firmly. "Not with a simple apology." This isn't about you feeling better about what you did. This is about recognizing the harm you caused and the bias you revealed. They pulled into Eleanor's driveway. Through her living room window, she could see her TV was on, probably playing the viral video on the local news already. Your father, Eleanor started, thinking of her late husband. He fought in Vietnam alongside black soldiers. He never. Don't. Sarah cut her off. Don't try to justify this with, I'm not usually like this, or I have black friends. What you did today showed exactly who you are, Mom. The question is, who do you want to be going forward? Eleanor sat in the car, letting her daughter's words sink in. Her phone showed another notification. Her grandson Daniel had deleted their shared photos from his Instagram account. I'll help you through this, Sarah said, softer now. But you need to do the work, Mom. Real work. Understanding why you did what you did, why you thought it was okay to treat another human being that way. They got out of the car and walked to the front door. Eleanor could see her neighbors peeking through their windows, phones in hand. By now, they'd all seen the video too. Inside, the local news was indeed playing the footage. Eleanor watched herself on screen, her face distorted with hatred, pointing her finger at a young man who'd done nothing wrong except exist in her presence. We're going to turn off the TV, Sarah said, reaching for the remote. We're going to sit down, and you're going to listen. Really listen. About privilege, about bias, about the damage you caused today. And then we're going to talk about what changes need to happen. Eleanor sank into her familiar armchair, the one she'd sat in countless times to read stories to Daniel. Now she wondered if he'd ever want to sit with her again. Her phone buzzed one final time, a message from her sister in Florida. I saw the video. I don't even know who you are anymore. Outside, the sun was setting on what had started as an ordinary Thursday afternoon. But for Eleanor Wilkinson, nothing would ever be ordinary again. Her world had shifted, not because of what Marcus Johnson had said or done, but because her own actions had finally forced her to see herself clearly. And the reflection was devastating. The video hit 1 million views by dinner time. Marcus sat at his parents' dining room table, watching his mother place an extra serving of her famous mac and cheese on his plate. His phone, set to silent, kept lighting up with notifications. You haven't touched your food, his mother said softly, touching his shoulder. You need to eat, baby. The dean called again, Marcus said, pushing the pasta around his plate. They want me to do an interview with Channel 7 News tomorrow. His father looked up from his own phone, where the video played silently. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do, son. The doorbell rang, the fourth time in the last hour. Local reporters had somehow found their address. Marcus's younger sister, Tanya, peeked through the curtains. Another news van, she reported, and some guy with a microphone. Their mother sighed and reached for the remote, turning up the volume on the kitchen TV. The evening news was playing the footage again, but this time with expert commentators analyzing the incident. What stands out is a remarkable composure shown by the young medical student, a sociology professor was saying. In the face of blatant racism, he demonstrated extraordinary dignity. Marcus's father muted the TV. Eat your dinner, son. The media circus can wait. But the circus wasn't waiting. Marcus's phone lit up again, a text from James, his lab partner. Bro, you're trending #1 on Twitter. The video's everywhere. Even some celebrities are sharing it. Tanya, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. My friend Jenny, her mom shops at that store too. She said she's seen that woman before, always following people around, making comments. Not anymore, their father said firmly. She won't be shopping there again. Marcus finally took a bite of his mother's mac and cheese, the familiar comfort food helping to ground him. I just want things to go back to normal. His mother squeezed his shoulder again. Baby, sometimes normal needs to be disrupted. Sometimes it takes one moment, one person standing up with dignity, to make people see what's been happening all along. Another notification lit up his phone, this time from Dr. Matthews, his advisor. CNN wants to interview you for their morning show tomorrow. Your choice, but this could be an important teaching moment. The doorbell rang again. Tanya checked the window. It's Lisa from your study group. Marcus nodded, and his sister let Lisa in. She rushed into the dining room, her laptop open. Marcus, you need to see this, she said, setting the computer on the table. People are sharing their own stories. The video, it's starting conversations everywhere. The laptop screen showed social media posts flooding in. This happened to my son last week. I've experienced this so many times. Thank you for showing us how to respond with dignity. His mother read over his shoulder, wiping tears from her eyes. This is bigger than just one incident in a store, isn't it? Marcus pushed his plate away, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was unfolding. His phone buzzed again, a text from Sarah, the store employee who had first tried to help him. The corporate office issued a statement. They are implementing mandatory bias training for all employees. Your incident was the tipping point. His father stood up, walking to the window where camera flashes occasionally lit up their front yard. You know, son, when I taught you how to handle these situations, I never imagined you'd be teaching others too. Tanya, who had been scrolling through her own phone, suddenly gasped. Oh my God, Marcus. Ellen DeGeneres just shared the video. She wants you on her show. Their mother quickly sat down, fanning herself with a napkin. Ellen? My baby on Ellen? I'm not going on Ellen, Marcus said firmly. I'm not going on any shows. I have finals coming up, and my presentation has been postponed, Lisa interrupted. Dr. Matthews sent an email to the whole class. He says you've already given the most important presentation of the semester. The doorbell rang yet again. This time, when Tanya checked, she saw something different. Marcus, she called, it's some kid with his mom. He's holding a sign. Marcus went to the window. Outside, a young black boy, maybe 12, stood with his mother. His sign read, "Thank you for showing me I can be a doctor too." Let them in, Marcus said quietly. The boy, whose name was Trevor, clutched a notebook as he entered their living room. His mother, Mrs. Baker, had tears in her eyes. We saw the video, she explained. Trevor's been saying he wants to be a doctor. But last week, a teacher told him to be more realistic about his goals. Then we saw you today. Trevor stepped forward, holding out his notebook. Could you sign this? I want to remember this day when I'm in medical school. Marcus took the notebook, feeling the weight of the moment. What kind of doctor do you want to be? Trevor. Pediatrician. The boy answered without hesitation. I want to help kids. Marcus wrote in the notebook. To Trevor, your dreams are realistic. Your goals are achievable. Never let anyone tell you otherwise. Future Dr. Trevor Baker. From one doctor to another. As he handed the notebook back, his phone buzzed again. Another text from Dr. Matthews. The medical school wants to start a scholarship in your name. For underrepresented students who demonstrate grace under pressure. Mrs. Baker wiped her eyes. What you did today, standing there with such dignity, you showed Trevor how to be strong without being angry, how to stand up without fighting back. Marcus's father stepped forward. Would you like to stay for coffee? We've got plenty of mac and cheese too. As they settled back at the dining table, now expanded to accommodate their guests, Marcus's phone kept lighting up with notifications. But for the moment, he focused on Trevor's eager questions about medical school, about study habits, about dealing with people who doubt you. Outside, more news vans were arriving. Social media continued to explode with reactions to the video. Channel 7 was setting up for their evening broadcast, using his house as a backdrop. But inside, something more important was happening. A young boy was seeing his dreams validated. A mother was feeling hope for her son's future. And Marcus, despite the chaos swirling around him, felt a quiet certainty that maybe, just maybe, his unplanned confrontation in a department store would help change the narrative for others like Trevor. His mother brought out fresh plates for their guests, and as Trevor took his first bite of her mac and cheese, his eyes lit up with the same joy Marcus had felt countless times at this table. Some things remained blessedly normal, even as the world outside was shifting. Marcus's phone lit up one final time that evening, a message from an unknown number. I'm Eleanor Wilkinson's grandson. I saw what happened. I'm so sorry. Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like. The next morning, Marcus woke up to find Future Dr. Johnson trending nationwide. His sister Tanya burst into his room, laptop in hand, before he could even get out of bed. You're on Good Morning America, she exclaimed, turning the screen toward him. They're playing the video and interviewing people from the store. On screen, Sarah, the young store employee, was speaking to the host. The way he handled it, it changed how I'll respond when I see these situations in the future. You can't just stand by anymore. Marcus grabbed his phone from the nightstand. 3,427 unread messages. 576 missed calls. His email inbox had crashed from the volume of incoming messages. Mom says to come downstairs, Tanya said, still scrolling through social media. Dr. Matthews is here. Marcus found his advisor sitting in their living room, talking quietly with his parents. The street outside was lined with news vans. Marcus, Dr. Matthews stood up. How are you holding up? I'm fine, Marcus said, though his head was spinning from the chaos of the past 24 hours. Just want to focus on my studies. That's partly why I'm here. Dr. Matthews pulled out an envelope. The Board of Trustees had an emergency meeting this morning. They've decided to establish the Marcus Johnson Scholarship for Medical Excellence and Social Justice. Marcus's mother gasped. His father reached for her hand. It's already fully funded, Dr. Matthews continued. Several alumni called in after seeing the video. They want to ensure that more students like you have the opportunity to become doctors. The doorbell rang again. Tanya checked through the window. It's Channel 7. They're still waiting for that interview. I don't want to be the face of this, Marcus said quietly. I just want to be a doctor. Son, his father leaned forward. Sometimes we don't choose our moments. Sometimes our moments choose us. Dr. Matthews nodded. The dean asked me to show you something else. He pulled up a video on his tablet. It showed the medical school's main lobby, where students had gathered around the large screen displaying news coverage of the incident. In the video, a group of first-year students, black, Hispanic, Asian, white, watched Marcus's response to Eleanor. When he delivered his line about potentially treating her in the ER one day, the lobby erupted in applause. You've given them something powerful, Dr. Matthews said. Hope, dignity, a blueprint for handling discrimination without losing yourself. Marcus's phone buzzed. A new email from Eleanor Wilkinson's daughter, Sarah. Dear Mr. Johnson, my son Daniel showed my mother the responses to her actions online. She spent all night reading stories from people who've experienced similar treatment. This morning, she asked to enroll in bias awareness training. Your dignity in the face of her hatred cracked something open in her. Thank you for showing her, showing all of us, a better way. Sincerely, Sarah Wilkinson. A knock at the door made them all look up. This time it was James and Lisa from his study group. Bro, James said, holding up his phone. The video hit international news. BBC, Al Jazeera, you're global. Lisa pulled out her tablet. The medical school's Instagram is blowing up. Look at these comments. Marcus scanned the screen. This is what a real healthcare professional looks like. Finally, someone showing how to handle hate with grace. My daughter wants to be a doctor now because of him. Dr. Matthews cleared his throat. There's one more thing. The American Medical Association wants you to speak at their annual conference about maintaining professional composure in challenging situations. Marcus sat down heavily on the couch. His mother brought him a cup of coffee, her hands shaking slightly. Baby, she said softly. Remember when you were 10? That time at the swimming pool when those parents pulled their kids out of the water? Marcus nodded. He'd never forgotten that day. You asked me why people acted that way, she continued. I didn't have a good answer then. But yesterday, you showed everyone the best answer. Dignity doesn't shout. It stands firm. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Trevor, the boy who'd visited last night. Dr. Marcus, I told my whole class about meeting you. My teacher apologized for saying I couldn't be a doctor. Thank you. Attached was a photo of Trevor's classroom. Every student held a sign. Future doctor, future nurse, future scientist. James sat down next to Marcus. The study group talked. We're starting a mentorship program. Going to local schools, showing kids they can be whatever they want to be. Using your moment as a teaching tool, Lisa added. If that's okay with you. Outside, more cameras flashed. The street had become a media campground. But inside, Marcus felt something settling into place. Dr. Matthews checked his watch. The dean would like to see you at 2. The governor called. They are discussing statewide bias training requirements for all retail establishments. Marcus's father stood up. Before any meetings or interviews, my son needs breakfast. A doctor needs his strength. They moved to the kitchen, where his mother had made his favorite breakfast, French toast and bacon. As they ate, the TV in the background played clips from last night's coverage. In a time of viral confrontations and heated exchanges, one medical student showed us another way. The power of dignity in the face of discrimination. A teaching moment that's becoming a movement. Tanya, still monitoring social media, suddenly spoke up. "Marcus, look at this." She held up her phone. The Riverside department store had changed its website. Their homepage now featured a new statement, committed to dignity, respect, and equal treatment for all customers. Inspired by the courage of one customer who showed us we can do better. Below the statement was a link to their new anti-bias training program, named the Johnson Protocol. Marcus stared at his French toast. "I just wanted to buy notebooks." "Sometimes," Dr. Matthews said gently, "the smallest actions create the biggest changes. You didn't just buy notebooks yesterday, Marcus. You taught a lesson that's still teaching." His phone buzzed one more time. A message from the pediatric ward where he volunteered. "Our patients saw you on TV. They are asking when the kind doctor is coming back. You've got a lot of kids here who suddenly want to go to medical school." 1 week after the incident, Marcus walked through the automatic doors of Riverside department store again. The media frenzy had finally started to die down, though a few reporters still lingered in the parking lot, hoping for a follow-up story. The store looked different now. New signs hung prominently near the entrance. "All are welcome here," and "Respect, Dignity, Community." Security guard Rodriguez nodded as Marcus passed, touching his cap in recognition. "Good to see you back, Mr. Johnson," he said. Marcus adjusted his backpack, lighter now without the textbooks. He'd aced his rescheduled presentation yesterday, earning praise from Dr. Matthews for incorporating real-world examples of healthcare bias into his research. Sarah, the young employee who'd first offered to help him, rushed over from the customer service desk. "Dr. Johnson. Future Dr. Johnson. Just Marcus is fine." He smiled, noting her new name tag that read Assistant Manager. "You should see the changes," she said excitedly. Corporate implemented everything they promised. Bias training, new policies, community outreach programs, they even hired diversity consultants. As they talked, other customers began to recognize him. A woman with 2 young daughters approached hesitantly. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, "but my girls watched your video in school. Their teacher used it for a lesson on courage." The girls, probably around 8 or 9, stared up at him with wide eyes. The older one spoke first. "Mom said you're going to be a doctor even though some people didn't want you to." Marcus knelt down to their level. "That's right. And you know what? You can be whatever you want to be too." "I want to be a doctor like you," the younger girl declared. "Not if I become one first," her sister challenged. Their mother wiped away tears as she led them away, the girls still debating who would become a doctor sooner. Patricia, the store manager, emerged from her office. "Marcus, I was hoping you'd come back. There's someone who'd like to speak with you." She gestured toward the coffee shop inside the store. Sitting at a corner table was Daniel, Eleanor Wilkinson's grandson, nervously fidgeting with a paper cup. Marcus walked over, remembering the text message he'd received that first night. Daniel stood up quickly, almost knocking over his chair. "Mr. Johnson," he started, his voice shaking. "I wanted to apologize in person for what my grandmother did." "You don't need to apologize for someone else's actions," Marcus said, taking a seat across from him. "No, but I need to tell you something," Daniel insisted. "After what happened, after seeing how you handled it, I decided to change my college plans. I'm applying to pre-med programs now." Marcus studied the teenager's face, seeing the same determination he'd felt at that age. "My grandmother," Daniel continued, "she's different now. She's been going to these community dialogue sessions at the church, actually listening to people's experiences. Yesterday, she told me she's proud of my decision to become a doctor." A small crowd had gathered nearby, phones out, probably recording this moment of reconciliation. But Marcus focused on Daniel's earnest face. "It won't be easy," Marcus said honestly. "There will be people who doubt you, question you, try to stop you." "I know," Daniel nodded. "But you showed me how to handle that. With dignity." At the next table, an elderly black woman dabbed her eyes with a napkin, having overheard their conversation. She stood up slowly, leaning on her cane. "Young man," she addressed Marcus, her voice carrying the weight of years, "I'm 82 years old. I've seen a lot of hatred in my time, but I've never seen it answered quite the way you did. You gave us all a masterclass in dignity. More customers gathered around, many filming on their phones. Marcus felt uncomfortable with the attention, but the elderly woman wasn't finished. My late husband was a civil rights activist, she continued. He always said, "Don't let them make you hate." You showed us exactly what he meant. Marcus's phone buzzed, a text from his mother. "Proud of you, baby. Always." Patricia approached with a small package. "The corporate office asked me to give you this." Inside was a gift card with a note. "For your next supply run. All your educational materials are on us for the rest of your medical school journey." Marcus tried to decline, but Patricia held up her hand. "It's not charity. It's an investment in the kind of doctor we need more of." As if on cue, a young black boy walked in with his mother. He wore a white coat over his regular clothes and carried a toy stethoscope. "Look, Mom," he pointed at Marcus. "It's him, the doctor from the video." The boy ran over, his toy stethoscope bouncing around his neck. "I'm going to be just like you. I'm practicing already." Marcus looked around the store, at Daniel planning his medical school journey, at the young boy in his play doctor coat, at Sarah proudly wearing her assistant manager badge, at the elderly woman who'd seen so much history, at the diverse group of customers filming this moment of healing. His phone buzzed again. Dr. Matthews had sent a link to an article. Medical schools report surge in applications from minority students. Cite the Marcus Johnson effect. Sarah leaned in to whisper, "The store's different now." "You change things. We all change things," Marcus replied. "Every time we choose dignity over hatred, respect over fear." The young boy was still chattering excitedly about becoming a doctor. His mother mouthed "thank you" over his head. Marcus's phone showed another text, this time from his father. "Son, your mother's cooking Sunday dinner for some special guests. The governor and his wife want to hear more about that scholarship program." Looking around one last time at the store that had become an unexpected turning point in his life, Marcus felt a deep sense of peace. The signs about welcome and respect weren't just corporate window dressing. They represented real change, sparked by one moment of choosing dignity over anger. As he walked toward the exit, customers and employees nodded in recognition. Near the door, a new plaque had been installed. In this store, on an ordinary Thursday, an extraordinary lesson was taught. Dignity speaks louder than hatred, and education knows no color. Outside, the sun was setting on another day in Riverside. The news vans were finally gone. The reporters moved on to other stories. But something had permanently shifted, not just in this store, but in the hundreds of thousands of people who had witnessed a simple exchange between a medical student and an angry woman. Marcus pushed through the rotating doors, stepping into the cool evening air. His phone lit up with one final message from an unknown number. "My daughter saw your video in school today. She came home and announced she's going to be a doctor. She's 7. And until today, she didn't think she could because she never saw a doctor who looked like her. Thank you for showing her it's possible." As Marcus walked to his car, he passed the spot where Eleanor had been escorted out a week ago. The memory didn't bring anger or pain, just hope that her grandson would indeed become a doctor, that the young boy with the toy stethoscope would achieve his dreams, that the two sisters would race each other to medical school. In the end, it hadn't just been about buying school supplies. It had been about supplying something far more valuable: hope, dignity, and the power of choosing how to respond when faced with hatred. The automatic doors swished closed behind him, but the ripples of that ordinary Thursday afternoon would continue to spread, touching lives far beyond the aisles of Riverside Department Store.